If you're doing things for the intrinsic pleasure of doing them, and you're doing things for the right reasons, your motivation is pure, it leads on to good things.
I have never watched a more engaging video that just has a talking head.
Yeah.
You know, in that sort of situation, when there's tension, especially if you're in a limited amount of time and you're working for a magazine and you want to get a good result for the picture editor, actually none of that really matters.
So
yeah, I'm like a
think
little
about it.
Jack Russell. I'm just like, I'll just keep pushing it until they tell me to f*** off. And basically, what happens is he won't go back to the hard drive in his memory and then basically think he was an arsehole. But
Yeah.
basically, he'll just remember the pictures. Oh, the goats look great.
Hello, welcome to the Full Frame Podcast with Mark and Ben. I'm Mark, this is Ben, and this is the Full Frame Podcast with Mark and Ben. We're in a bit of a different place today because we're joined by some special guests, Fred and Harry Borden. Hello.
Hello.
Welcome to the Full Frame.
Thanks for having
Thank you.
us.
So excited to have you onto the show as well.
yeah,
It's going to be great.
we haven't really said it yet, but we are big fans.
Whenever your videos come out, one of us texts the
Yeah.
other one, like, they've got a new video.
Mark
We're
sends
so
me
tested
the link, and I go, "Yeah, watched it."
Yeah, this happened yesterday.
Oh, that's lovely feedback.
Yeah.
Appreciate that. for
Yeah.
Sure.
Nice. How did you come up with the idea to make a YouTube channel?
Well, I've always been interested in Harry's work.
Yeah.
I thought other people would like to hear the stories. I used to always tell my friends, like, oh yeah, my dad shot Mike Skinner and this happened or something like that. So
Yeah.
It happened over time, though. I don't think there was a long period when my kids had no idea. It was just kind of annoying that I was kind of like quite egotistical, and I had things that were more important. There's nothing more important, obviously, than my children. But I do remember with Polly, my daughter, it was quite funny. There was one occurrence. I think it was her 15th birthday, so she should have known more about what I did. Although she might have said at one point, "Do you photograph famous people?" But she had all her friends round, and there was a big open plan living room, and they were all in there. And the door handle, when I said "night night girls," and she'd been sort of stroppy with me the whole day and stuff like that, and the door handle fell off of the door as I shut the door, and I sort of went to. I wasn't listening at the door, is what I'm trying to say. I was putting the door handle back on, and I heard one of Polly's friends said to her, "Your dad's really cool. He photographs famous people." And she probably said, "Yeah, but he's an idiot," as teenage girls do. But I hadn't realised that you were probably more interested in people that you were interested in, like Mike Skinner or whatever.
we actually have one video which is private. So we tried making this channel 6 months before our Harry Potter video, which is our first kind of public one.
Yeah,
And it was on Kanye, and I actually used advertising. You can do you can push videos, YouTube will push it and you pay them.
Yeah.
But your retention just completely drops,
Right.
and you get no engagement. So I privated that one and started again 6 months later.
In fact, it's appropriate that it's almost a year since we started.
Yeah, I think it's about 10
And
months.
that first Kanye video, we learnt a lot because he was seated in the wrong place, so I was
Yeah.
sort of looking down.
No, I think you were
Like
looking
I could-
up, and at the time you had a detached retina.
That's
so your
right.
eye was
Yeah.
twitching.
right.
Yeah, so my
Yeah.
eye, well, I looked like I'd been in a car crash, and also I was sort of looking away from the light.
Yeah.
But it was filmed upstairs in Fred's flat,
Yeah.
and it was an experiment. But for me, it was something. For me, that my most important and precious photographs are the pictures I take of my kids. So I love doing projects with them, and it's been lovely, Fred, doing something creative, because before, as I was saying, he was working as a software engineer, and although it was kind of lucrative, he wasn't getting anything out of it, and you're a lot happier now.
I mean, everyone in my family, like Dad, obviously being a photographer. My mum is in the fashion industry, and Dad's siblings are all artists. So
yeah,
I
my
was
brother
destined
and
for something
sister.
creative, and I wasn't fulfilling that creative urge
Yeah.
developing.
Yeah.
that's really nice to hear. Like that, you just sort of broke out of something and just decided to
It's
go
just not worth it.
head first.
When I was
cool.
young, I always thought I want to make loads of money, and that was my main goal. But then I kind of nearly got that, or I got that, and then realised it's not about that,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
you need to be fulfilled. So I quit.
Definitely. Yeah, nice.
I mean, I started because I wanted to avoid doing a proper job and follow the path of least resistance.
Yeah.
You know, I was always interested in having a good time, really. You know, I was sort of a controlled hedonist, so I would kind of like do these things because it sounded like a good laugh. Like I had two mates that went to Plymouth College of Art and Design, and I just thought that would be fantastic. We can swim in the sea, sunbathe on the Hoe, you know, play snooker on Union Street. And so, you know, and then as a byproduct of that, I got into the photography and stuff. But, you know, I kind of think that it's really, for me, it was a process of my friend dying, probably quite recently, 2018, that made me realise with regard to Fred and me generally, that you only have one life. And money is a means to an end. It sort of is an opportunity. It gives you choices and stuff, but just chasing it in and of itself is a pointless and kind of futile thing to do.
Definitely. I was actually quite surprised when you were supportive of me quitting my job. I think my mum was less so, but yeah.
Yeah, because he'd done a degree apprenticeship at the Royal Bank of Canada, and you know he'd got a job working from home, very, very well paid,
Comfy, like.
Yeah, I mean, you know, on paper, job done as far as a parent is concerned. His sister works for Meta, so she's doing well, and so, you know, me and his mum were like, yeah, this is fantastic. And then it's quite shocking when he's like, I'm going to quit. I'm going to quit.
It's amazing, isn't it, how like you can put so much effort into like a goal and then, you know, it just doesn't work out and you can just completely abandon it and actually be more fulfilled. Like,
Yeah,
it's amazing.
I'm 10 times happier than I
that's really
had
cool.
been in the last 10 years. Yeah.
It's such a cliche, but it is about the journey. It's about the process of, like, you guys, you know, you go out, your mates, you know, you're having an adventure every day. Every day's different. I mean, what's not to like? You know.
Yeah.
I can tell that on your channel as well, that you're genuinely having a good time.
Yeah. I mean, we've been like, so the company that I work at that Mark does freelance stuff for, I've been there for like 8 years. So I've known you for 8 years. And we've been doing jobs together for that long.
Yeah,
and
like it's always like nice that before we had the film photography, we would just go out and not really do anything. But now it's like
if we were working away somewhere,
what are we going to photograph? Where are we going to go?
Yeah. We just take the opportunity. If we're away somewhere, we take the opportunity to
definitely
make a video or just go take photos or whatever. Yeah,
absolutely. And also, if you're doing things for the intrinsic pleasure of doing them, and you're doing things for the right reasons, your motivation is pure, it leads on to good things. So a good case in point was we did our video about Radiohead, and I talked about Johnny Greenwood, who's a lovely guy, and you know, and then I felt sort of
Colin Greenwood.
Johnny
You're
Greenwood,
his brother. His brother's
yeah,
also
Colin.
Really
Colin. Yeah. So we should probably edit that bit out. It's a bit rude.
That's all staying in now. That's all staying in.
Okay, fair enough. So basically, you know, I felt I'll reconnect with Colin. So I sent him a link to the video, and then he invited us to his book launch, which we went to last night. That's why I'm in London. In fact. You can take a look at his book. You know, fresh off the.
It's got a nice
press.
message on the front, actually. He wrote.
Yeah.
Oh right.
Yeah, it was very, very sweet, actually. Yeah, have a look.
I think he asked to be your assistant.
You can read it. Yeah, it was very, very flattering.
To Harry, I'm so humbled. Love
you,
Colin.
Love you.
P.S. Can I come be your assistant? There you go.
Yeah.
His
So-
handwriting is
It kind of
terrible. I've
looks
got to say.
It looks like a smiley face. Is
Yeah.
I think that's intentional.
His signature's
Yeah.
pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, that
So,
is a really nice book.
You know, but I've got a friend also, she's a brilliant photographer called Annie Collins, and there's no way she would be interviewed because we've tried to interview her as well. She was my assistant and she's so talented. So check out her website, anniecollins.com. But she basically didn't actually have any truck with the photo industry as it was and just started posting really cool stuff on her Instagram. And because she has a unique visual fingerprint, her work is really, really distinctive. It's just garnered a lot of attention, and she's entered into this collaboration with the two guys who live in Rottingdean called Rottingdean Bazaar, and now they're kind of the toast of the fashion world. They're doing really well. They're doing TikTok videos for Burberry, you
Nice.
know, and they're really kind of ploughing their own furrow. They don't live in Hoxton or Hackney or whatever. They're living in Rottingdean, and
I've
like
never even heard of Rottingdean.
yeah, it's the less cool part on the south coast.
Yeah.
It's where lots of old grannies live. You
Oh,
know?
right, okay.
Yeah, I mean,
Cool.
it's just crazy. But you know, I often talk to her about the fact that you've got to do your own thing, and if it and then you'll enjoy the process of doing it, and you'll have fun while you're doing it, and then if it's pure, if it's coming from your heart, it'll lead on to good things.
In terms of your videos, there's a format that we really love.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of you talking, and then not a lot of footage or B-roll or anything like that, but it's the odd photo. How much of that, what's the process of making that? And then how much of that is cut out? Because the story, the story in each video is fantastic. I'm just glued to every
I
time.
just want to make a point. Like, I have never watched a more engaging video, but like you feel like you're there.
Oh yeah,
With
it's just your
like,
story of what
yeah,
happened.
the way
Oh.
you
That means a
explain stories is like amazing.
We're actually moving away from that format. I feel
Oh,
like a
okay.
little
Well,
bit. Like the
you-
last few videos has been more.
Yeah.
talking,
Oh,
more
yeah.
engagement. Yeah.
I'm curious, what do you think of those ones compared?
I like them as well.
Okay,
The
so-
format is dictated to some extent by our, being geographically in different locations.
Yeah. Okay.
And I kind of am interested in I think for me that's the essence of being human, is storytelling and sort of narrative arcs. And I'm really interested in that. And as a photographer, it's a muscle that had withered away that I hadn't really used. I was always quite articulate. I think I'm a good talker. My dad was sort of Jewish American and, worked in advertising. And, he was a wise guy. He would always have... He wasn't a very good dad, but he would always come up with funny, pithy things. When he was on his deathbed, I remember we all went in to see him, and he was in the hospital, and he was out of his head on kind of opiates for the pain and stuff like that. He was dying, and we came in, and all of us trooped in, and he looked at my mum, and then he motioned towards us, and he said, "Who are these bananas?" And it's kind of like, he always had these strange kind of expressions and stuff like that. And I think what I always really like is the idea of actually creating, piquing people's interest. I script them when Fred isn't there, so I do sort of think about that narrative arc and
It feels very natural though.
Okay.
I mean, you must be a natural at talking because or sort of storytelling, because it is just so engaging. And just going back to the point you're saying, changing the format, I don't think filming on location is going to hurt it, but I think Harry's narrative is key. It's just the storytelling's great.
From an editing
Love it.
standpoint, we actually started on TikTok. And
Okay, yeah.
TikTok's all about engagement, cutting every
quick, yeah.
or I would also
cuts are so aggressive, and
Yeah.
for these YouTube ones, I think I apply a little bit of what we learned from TikTok.
Yeah, I
when
think
it's just Harry talking.
I should also a lot of the credit goes to Fred, because also he will mess around with the sequencing.
Okay,
so so you'll make it, and he's
Yeah.
brutal as well. He'll edit out me pontificating
Yeah.
for too
You
long.
have to, I think the number one, it has to be as short as possible.
Yeah.
So you got to cut everything really.
Oh yeah, whenever we do a podcast, I'm like, oh,
Oh,
Mark.
yeah, I've
I was like,
10, 20 minutes.
Yeah, I'm just like, I went off on a tangent, just cut that.
In terms of what we'll talk about, where your YouTube videos are, and you said you're changing it up. I really like the tour of the house one where you were going through the photos. I loved it.
Yeah.
I was like, "There's some you're missing. Why are you not talking about those?"
yeah.
So I want to see more. You go through the
Living room
ones you
galleries.
missed.
So the idea with that is to link up with other photographers, is it? And then
Yeah.
go around their living
or
rooms and
even
things?
even creative people like Colin Greenwood. He
Right,
he
yeah.
asked Colin yesterday.
Nice.
That's what you want to do. Yeah, nice.
It's like MTV Cribs, but
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
art edition.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's it. We've got a few little formats we wanted to try. We've got a new one, negative roulette. That's what we want to do. Do you remember that one?
yeah. Well, Fred came up with this. He gives quite good ideas,
I'm an
man.
ideas guy.
Yeah, so he just thought, because I've got 25,000 rolls of film, in my office.
Wow.
And so Fred suggested sort of you'd have a
Throw a
dart
dart,
with a rubber sticker, and you just go like that, and then you open a negative file, and you just randomly
Talk about.
what happened.
There'll be one where you'll be like, I don't remember.
There's probably going to be quite a few.
Or some intimate pictures that you took.
Yeah, we're not sharing that one.
I do think about that actually. Should I go through my archive with a fine-tooth comb and save my children the embarrassing kind of? Because when I'm sort of dead on the slab, they're going to have to go through all that stuff. I was saying to Fred, because of his interest and because of the channel and everything, maybe he should be, out of my 4 children, he should be the recipient of my negatives, and he can exploit the archive if it is of any value.
Sure, I thought about what you could actually do with it. Maybe some sort of similar to like Getty, some sort of database with all your images.
Right, yeah.
Well, the stuff's
everyone.
It's currently on Getty,
but I don't think Getty's doing enough.
Yeah.
It should be the go-to spot if you need a picture for videos, anything. Yeah.
Nice. Do you have like a document or a spreadsheet of all your video ideas and things?
No, I text them every now and again.
Oh, okay, yeah. We
started to do it. We've like diarised it now.
Yeah, we've just got a massive document of just ideas that we've come up with.
Yeah.
We should
do that really, like a Google Doc. We can both share it.
Yeah.
I mean, most of the people that I'm talking about, I just sort of like suggest I just do it, don't I? A lot of the time. I mean, I do.
You know the ones you have good stories about.
Yeah. I don't think the format's really changed. Actually, it's really just reverted back to what it was at the beginning, and it was fortunate that I was able to sort of go in the garage on a Saturday morning and just talk to myself, and he was able to cut it together sufficiently well that it made a good
like
narrative.
YouTube rewards like consistency, and
Yeah.
if I miss a week, like I feel like I've failed. So
You're also like I was going to say this earlier, but like I think we're quite a good pair for YouTube and this sort of sector, because you're really motivated to get the videos out and to go out and film a video, and then I'm sort of like, I'm always thinking about like the quality of the photos, you'll be like, we're going here, let's go do a video. I'm like, yeah, but like,
I think that comes across in your videos.
Yeah,
actually,
I'll just be like, yeah, but it's slough, like something like that, So I'm thinking, I'm not gonna like, what are we gonna do there?
We were in the Southampton vaults, weren't we?
Yeah, and
like,
that was we
rubbish.
didn't really know what to make of that,
and it was so rainy as well.
Yeah, that might make a good video, but
there's some good GoPro footage of us getting absolutely soaked.
Yeah.
You've got a Patreon as well recently.
Oh yeah.
What's their future plans with that as well?
Well, right now I just thought it's like another way to support the channel.
Yeah.
We've had a few.
People were asking.
I saw you subscribed actually.
Yeah. I think that was the second one.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah. We're up to 4 now, I think.
Really?
Nice.
Ben, you got to get in there.
Yeah, well, maybe we should start one.
No one's going to join.
I don't know what we do. Like, I think that's the harder bit, isn't it?
You need to trying to get one a week.
You need to give value.
Like when we make a video, Harry will send me so much like negatives, everything, and anything I don't use, I just tend to throw it up there for people to use. And it's also a way to like communicate with us. We'll reply to all messages on Patreon. Like that's the least we can do.
Yeah.
So we've had a few people kind of quizzing you recently.
Yeah.
And just asking for advice. Like
that's cool.
But we definitely have more plans. Like I think we were going to do like a monthly podcast or something on there. Or
we're thinking about also, doing just in terms of revenue stream, like I was just showing Fred the Jarvis Cocker. We're going to do one about Jarvis because the Britpop stuff seems to be doing very well, and I love Jarvis. But there's loads of images that have just never been seen. So we were thinking like the way trainers, you do drops and stuff.
Like Supreme and stuff like that. They do like drops.
But like make them affordable
amount,
and then
affordable.
That's cool. Yeah.
And then just say this print has never been seen anywhere. With
and just
80 of them available,
and just promote that through Patreon or just YouTube, have that for everyone.
Just YouTube, right? There's 80 of them available, and normally prints of these ones up here, they're on Getty for like a silly money. Like
Getty don't sell prints; they license the imagery.
But I've seen them on Snappy galleries. Or is it?
Snap galleries.
Galleries. And it's just so expensive. So
I think the model excludes most people because they can't really afford to pay, and it sort of fetishizes the and actually in an era of AI, I'd rather sell like a lot of prints for less, and the market will decide anyway. If they keep selling out, then you can put the price up a little bit, but we're not mercenary about it. That's not what we're motivated by. It's nice people keep asking, don't they?
It's just another way to be
support
rewarded
the
for our
channel
efforts
stuff,
as well. because it is a lot of work. We do put a lot of work into.
I mean, it'd be nice to, buy and seeing all your gear, buy another Sony mirrorless maybe. So we've got two
angles
cameras,
would be good.
Yeah,
I'll start getting more on them. Do you use AI when you edit? Like,
we were going to talk to you about this.
Yeah, we have got a point about AI.
Yeah. A bit. When it's with this, like I could do it really easily. Like you go camera 1, camera 2, camera 3, and then it will just go and do it.
Match them all. Yeah.
So I could do it. I tend not to because I like to go through it and know what I'm editing.
What about for audio?
I've used it for like if I'm recording an interview with someone and it's like outside and there's been a car go past and it ruins a word, I can clone their voice.
It's pretty amazing to do that. Yeah.
So I've done that.
We've been using it on every video. I think we can't quite get our audio perfect.
Okay, just to tidy it up.
I think that's actually an interesting, in relation to Fred, the fact that he was a software engineer. He's got that kind of more of a fine knowledge of the mechanics and the software that underscores everything.
Although it's so like accessible now. You don't have to have any technology
but like when he was a kid, we used to call him Fiddler Fred because he'd be like taking things apart.
I've always been very much into tech. Yeah.
It wasn't for any nefarious reasons.
Definitely keeping that in.
No, that's right. It's funny. This is his humour. I don't know if it comes across in the videos. But,
No.
The last video with the Nepo baby was like a little peek into.
I know he didn't want to put that in. I just thought it's quite endearing because it's sort of like we get on really well.
Oh yeah, you can definitely tell that.
I mean, we're different, but like you guys, I think it's quite good because you kind of have. I'm more probably. I'm like we need to get. I like this morning. I'm up in London. We need to do another video. This is ridiculous. And like this weekend, I've got an exhibition in North Wales. Fred needs to sort of feel ready and stuff. Yeah. And I try and get him in front of the camera.
And you'll get a better video for it. Yeah.
But I'm like, it's all digital. Let's just film it, and if we don't like it, then we don't have to use it.
Yeah.
What first got you into photography as well? Like we were talking about this on the way up. Like we want to know. Like
I think probably having a father that was an art director in advertising. So you grow up in an environment where it's okay to notice creative things. So my friend, the person I was telling you about who died, he basically grew up in a farming environment, and his dad thought he was gay. This is like back in the 80s because he was like being a ponce and he was sort of interested in, it was absolutely regressive kind of attitudes back then, homophobia really. He wasn't even gay, but basically not that being gay is associated with art or artistic endeavour. But, his family kind of like thought it wasn't a proper job. Whereas my dad had worked in advertising. He'd worked with really good photographers. Like he'd commissioned like Avedon and Penn and people like that. He'd worked in New York on Madison Avenue. He was one of those guys, a madman for Young and Rubicon. And so we kind of had that environment. My dad didn't encourage us. I mean, he was absolutely hostile to us, just generally. I think he wasn't really that into having kids, and so when we came along, we were kind of competition for my mum's sort of scarce emotional resources, because my mum was quite sort of, she died, I'm not sort of giving her the best eulogy, but she was a lovely person, but she was quite emotionally, she was quite posh, and she'd been sent away to private school when she was young, and so, it was kind of an environment where we were kind of cut loose, and able to do whatever we wanted, and my dad basically, there was all artistic things around the house, like stuff that he bought from an antique shop in New York, or like vintage prints that were kind of before it was cool to collect sort of movie posters or whatever. Nice. So I kind of grew up with that environment, and then in addition to that, but I sort of had to come to it myself and sort of push through my dad telling me that he'd worked with great photographers and I hadn't got what it takes to be a photographer and I should work in a camera shop. That's what he said to me. And similarly, my sister, who's really talented, came second in the BP Portrait Award, a couple of years back. She's Frances Borden, her name is. He said to her that she should do window dressing, and he told my brother he should join the army. It's kind of really bad careers advice for any of us. But having said that, I think we kind of grew up in an environment that made it okay to do something creative, and then I guess we had it sort of felt natural. Maybe we did have sort of a natural inclination and temperament to the visual. I do think there's a disproportionate number of photographers who are dyslexic, and I'm probably undiagnosed dyslexic. I mean, Polly, my daughter, in her final year at college, she found that she was severely dyslexic.
No, you're definitely dyslexic.
Yeah. So basically, I mean, I think that's just your brain is wired in such a way. It's not necessarily a bad thing, because I think you kind of have an advanced sort of way that you view the world. So I just found, I went down to Plymouth College of Art and Design with my two mates, thinking it'd just be a laugh. And then I sort of jettisoned them and got in with another group of people, and I'm quite competitive, and we kind of got into it, and we sort of liked these great photographers, like Richard Avedon and Irving Penn and people like that, Diane Arbus. And I kind of just very competitive. I wanted to work out how you could do that, and it was very playful and very organic. I just sort of, it was just an obsessive need to kind of unpick what they were doing. They realised they were shooting on medium format. I did an OND, an ordinary national diploma, not an HND. And so we weren't even allowed to use the medium format cameras, but I sort of blagged, a Hasselblad and worked out how they did it and worked out the lighting. And then so I methodically photographed everybody I knew, because I got obsessed with it, in a sort of, like Richard Avedon, sort of David Bailey's way, sort of against a stark white background. So when I came to London, unlike other people who'd been to college, where you'd have a bit of everything in your portfolio to show you were versatile, I had like 20 portraits, stark black and white portraits, and so it made it a good fit for the NME, which was back then it was printed on really poor quality newspaper. So that kind of graphic approach worked really well in that sort of forum,
So would you say it's portraits have been your main thing right from the start, or have you dabbled in other genres?
I photograph everything really. Yeah. I mean, it's kind of what happened was when I was a little kid, probably about sort of 14 or something. My parents bought me like this 70 to 210 Vivitar lens, to put on my kind of second-hand camera. That friend I was telling you about, he influenced me because, I saw that he had a camera, and it's a sort of metally, sensual thing to mess around with, isn't it? It's sort of something that you kind of enjoy having as a possession. Probably like, I felt guilty about that because my dad sort of was very disparaging. That's why he probably said work in a camera shop. But actually, I'm not going to apologise for it because it is a sort of sensual thing. And so I bought this kind of Minolta camera, and and then just had a standard lens for ages. And then I bought this 70 to 210. And I remember there was there's probably a moment with most photographers when you suddenly realise that you're composing pictures instinctually. You're kind of having an obsessive opinion about the way that everything is arranged within the frame.
Yeah. And
for me, it was like we lived on a farm. We had of all things a pig farm. Given my dad was a New York Jewish ex-art director, he moved down to Devon, probably had a midlife crisis and bought a pig farm, So we went from London life to abject poverty, mucking out pigs before we went to school. But I went down into the fields, and they were kind of cutting the straw to make bales. And there was a combine harvester, and I had this 70 to 210 lens, and I remember sort of taking these pictures and I was almost like somebody else had taken control. And I've never really talked about this. And I kind of just composed these pictures, which later on, when they came back from bonus print, because they were shot on film, I was like really gratified. I just thought, wow, this is something here.
Yeah.
And there was no happy accidents. It was like I had a very strong instinct about how to arrange things. And that's the essence of being a photographer, is just having an opinion. And if your opinion is consistent, then that's your visual fingerprint. Whether it's applauded and liked by people is neither here nor there, but that's basically what photography is.
Yeah.
But you named all these famous portrait photographers, Avedon.
Yeah, you asked about portraits.
Arbus.
Yeah, I mean,
do you have any that you're talking about landscape? We were talking about.
Yeah, I mean, I think that actually, in a practical sense, I mean, people talk about street photography, or they talk about landscapes and everything, but it's very difficult to make a living doing that. I photograph all those. I took a picture the other day, you know, that was a really interesting picture in Slough,
Nice.
at the Asda in Slough, which I stopped at on my way down to Devon for lunch, and I took this picture of this mural on the wall, you know, with people out, and there was a kid sort of painted on the wall, you know. So I'm alive to those pictures, and I see them, and I take them, and I enjoy taking them, and I've got some really good shots that way, but it was kind of on a purely pragmatic way of earning a living.
Yeah.
It made a lot of sense. And also, I'm sort of quite an extrovert person. I'm quite happy to meet people and have you know, every day is different. It's fun. You know, for me, it's like, you know, it's like the difference between an extrovert and an introvert. Apparently an introvert, when they're in a sort of situation with a crowd, they feel diminished and they start to, their energy drains away. Whereas if you're an extrovert, you feel kind of energized. And so I'm of the latter, you know, so it suited me temperamentally. And I realized that I could work well under pressure. And then you photograph people, you know, as a pragmatic choice, and then you enjoy it more, and so you end up taking the path of least resistance. It's like a well-worn track. You just get used to photographing people. But when occasionally I got asked to do other things, you know, I would be happy to do it. I photograph cars,
Nice.
you know, all sorts of other things. I love doing landscapes as well. But I just think I tend to think that landscapes are a bit boring, you know.
Yeah, I do.
What are you really saying, apart from I was here and I got up at 4 o'clock in the morning and I hiked up to this place where everyone else takes a picture, by the way, so it's not really that kind of...
Yeah, I do love the like process of taking a landscape photo, like getting in an awkward spot, but then, yeah, you're right, they can be quite boring. And I think modern day landscapes are just like really moody clouds and like, you know, soft water and things. It's just there are a lot of cliches in landscape. I think there's a lot of cliches in a lot of photography. Like
I think what's the point of doing a landscape after Ansel Adams?
Yeah,
you know?
yeah, right, yeah.
Do you still do like BMX? And
Yeah, all the time. Yeah, that's kind of been like a thing alongside photography. Like I had a little bit where I filmed edits and stuff for like local riders, and I've always like taken photos of bikes and stuff. So
I've always loved the kind of skateboarding, BMX kind of photography film niche.
Yeah.
There's such a style to that as well.
I do love shooting that, but it's good fun. Oh, but going back to your like as a child shooting, I like feel like I really resonate with that, because I definitely, my photography roots are like pre-learning anything about photography. Do you know what I mean? And I look at some of my photos that I took when I must have been like 11, 12, and I'm like, how did I know to frame it like that? Because it's just perfect. Now I know the aspects and of what makes a good photo.
Yeah.
And I think like that's the difference between a photographer that's just gone out and done it when they were young without any like knowledge, and someone who's grown up and learned all the bits. You know, you can get really hung up on compositional features and things, and you know, and that's just not what you want to be thinking about when you're looking through the viewfinder. You just want to spot it and know that feel confident that that's a nice framing. You know, do you know what I mean?
I think it's like something that applies to a lot of creative endeavor.
Yeah,
is that the more you start to kind of edit and make kind of conscious decisions, the further you're getting away from your gut reaction, which is what you wanted in the first place.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, quite often, I mean, when I was doing Keir Starmer, there was like Larry, the Downing Street cat, people were going on about that. So
yeah, my wife was like, was he photographing the cat? I was like, yeah, you got a couple of photos.
No, basically, what happened was the Guardian said, can you get a picture of the number 10 on the door and everything? And not meant to go up close to the door, but I just sort of did. And then the door opened, and then they said, you have to come in. So I had the camera on the tripod. I had a Fuji GFX on the tripod. Right. And you're sort of sitting opposite the where the door opens in a sort of bench, waiting for the guy to come and get you, you know, who you're dealing with. And at that moment, Larry just sort of came in, and he just sat down. I thought,
This is the one where he's just sat on the carpet in the
yeah,
middle
he's
of the room.
right in the middle of the frame.
Yeah.
But what's interesting about that is that's the first frame. I just didn't,
Right.
I didn't think about composition. I just
Yeah.
I nailed it, and it's very German Dusseldorf school of photography. It's very representational. There's no aesthetics. It's basically
That's what it is.
and it's the best picture.
I find that a lot. Like
Because after that, I started screwing around and changing the composition, and
I think that's like the curse of digital, is that you do keep going to try and get something better when actually that first one was perfect. And I think that's what film has made me do, is feel satisfied with the first shot of whatever I take, you know, because I don't want to take like 3 photos of the same thing, you know, unless I'm confident it is going to be better. But
the best example of that is William Eggleston. You know, who, you know, basically, I think he just took one frame of things.
Just takes it as it is, basically.
Yeah. What you first were attracted to is that magic. It's like an indefinable sort of an enigma. That's what you need to capture.
Yeah.
And then as soon as that kind of human analytical brain starts coming in, that's when it starts getting boring.
Yeah. As soon as I start thinking about composition, it just like starts to look really rigid and like you know. And I think just being in like people talk about like flow states, you know, street photographers, like some of them walk around with headphones in and they go into like the zone, and I think that's when you get like the best photos. You're just not thinking about like the technicals, you know.
Yeah.
One of the things when we first started watching your videos was you make it seem so easy, and I think for me, when I'm taking portraits of people, it's the people I know really well that I get the best portraits of.
Oh, it's interesting. Actually.
With my son, it's like I don't know if he's really good, like he's just really good looking, and I get really good photos of him.
Well, he's
or
got
it's
a
just
good looking dad.
or that like it's just like we've got that relationship, so he's relaxed around him, and I'm relaxed. When you're like photographing people, you talk about this relationships with people a lot, and it's like it's a representation of your relationship with them on the day. If it's not such a good relationship, does that show, or is it the other way around as well?
The thing is, if you're sufficiently in control of the medium in terms of composition and the lighting and so on, then actually, if it's a bad relationship, that can work equally well. I mean, a good case
of a photo,
I mean, look at the case with the blur pictures when we were playing pool. You know, they didn't really like us. You know, Damon didn't like me. I should have put this in the video, but I remembered the other day that I was calling him Damien, which probably didn't help. But basically, sometimes that tension is really, really good. And there was another picture that
you can definitely see those.
But do you think
looking over the pool table?
Does the tension just make for like better facial expressions, or is it just the way?
The energy almost.
More emotion. Yeah.
I think I think you can let the tension. What you need to do is just sort of it's like everything, like life. You know, you need to just pull back because none of this really matters. I mean, we're just like a tiny thing on a tiny planet in a huge. Nothing really matters.
Yeah.
And when you do pull back, you realise that. You know, in that sort of situation, when there's tension, especially if you're on a limited amount of time and you're working for a magazine and you want to get a good result for the picture editor, actually none of that really matters. And what I've got to the point now where it is a bit of a Zen thing. And I'm too long in the tooth. I don't want to swear, but I don't really mind if they don't like me, you know, I know that I'm a good person. I know my children love me. That's all that matters to me. And I have my friends, and I'm a good person. So I think, you know, in that, if you can genuinely lock into that kind of frame of mind, if somebody's being tense, you can sort of just pull back, and not just sort of as a metaphor, but also physically pull back and just survey the scene, and then just sort of calmly. Just observe it as like William Eggleston sort of takes pictures like somebody who doesn't know what a car is or what a man is, and just sort of just dispassionately arranges things in a kind of way that is consistent and strange. And so just plug into something like that where you're just being playful and you know they're grumpy and they're not going to give you much time, but don't engage with that. Just observe it dispassionately, and then you'll be able to kind of relax, and that's when you can be creative. So, like when I photographed the Spice Girls or whatever, at the shot in Bangkok, I shot them in Bangkok, and there's this black and white picture. Yeah, so when I shot that, that was, the shoot was over. They were kind of relaxing, and then, they just arranged themselves in that space like that,
isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
You couldn't ask them to sit like that, could you? Like with her hand on her leg. Oh,
exactly.
Brilliant.
I mean, it's perfect.
Yeah.
And being a photographer is really being alive to those serendipitous things that present themselves, and they do present themselves regularly, in life. And it's like taking chances. It's like meeting your wife or whatever. There will be a point where you have to make a decision, and you can sort of like procrastinate. So in that situation, I knew that was a good picture. I didn't know quite how good that. I didn't know it's in the National Portrait Gallery. It's a definitive picture of them. Wow. But at the time, I could have chosen to not to be shy, because they didn't particularly like me. I was just this annoying photographer. I was over in Bangkok. I'd had my allocated time, and I just sort of had to
spend a week with them, didn't you?
We were there sort of for a few days, but we were just following them around, getting reportage. But then I sort of had to sort of say, "This is really brilliant. Just hold that," and I managed to get a quick frame film through my 6.7.
Brilliant.
And there's one frame where the two in the middle, their heads are touching together, and that's the sort of magic of it. But then I wasn't excited because it wasn't digital. It wasn't like Larry the Cat. I was excited about Larry the Cat because I thought Larry's quite, because I didn't really know much about Larry. But then I was telling people I was doing Kia, and they were saying, make sure you get Larry or whatever. Yeah. But with that, I had to wait until I got it back to London, and then process the things in my I would have processed the film in my own dark room, and then then over time it sort of takes on in the National Portrait Gallery they sell postcards with that picture on. It becomes quite bigger than me or my photography practice. It just becomes a kind of part of the cultural landscape, a sort of visual element in the collage of Britain in the 90s.
Yeah. I think that brings us on to a good point. You talk a lot about how when you do shoots, you kind of try and stick to the brief, and then you'll, be more creative afterwards. And how often, like with that one, does the creative shot actually end up getting used?
The creative shot will always trump.
Really?
Yeah, because the thing is that a lot of the time, it's not even what they want. It's the picture editors are actually under a lot of pressure from their editors, and they're not visual people. Yeah, and quite often they'll reference. I mean, I've got so many bad examples of
like Jeremy Clarkson.
Oh yeah, I mean that's a really.
Oh, that was What was it they wanted to throw?
Yeah, and that's the Guardian. That's like
that's crazy.
I would say the picture editors at the Guardian are brilliant. I love working with them, and they've been really supportive and given me really amazing assignments like that one. But a better example, I remember during the 90s, I was doing this band Cooler Shaker. I think the lead singer of Cooler Shaker. And Annie Leibovitz has a lot to answer for, because basically the picture editor or the editors on I think it was all terrible as well. It's for the Mail, which I wouldn't really probably work for now. And but I just see these magazines as a means to getting me access. But they basically sort of had this idea of the Bette Midler shot with all the roses. She's lying in this sort of background with all the roses, and she's sort of covered with roses and everything. And they thought they could just sort of hire a studio in Holborn, Holborn Studios, which is in Hackney or near Old Street, and just buy a few bunches of flowers. And then the pictures that Annie Leibovitz made, during the 80s, I know they cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to put together. So they probably would have had somebody who was just responsible for the roses, taking all the thorns off the roses,
Oh, yeah.
And so, you just have these kind of pathetic attempts to ape something that was brilliant, and you're not going to get any better, and had huge resources in order to put together. But the best things are done when I love it when people like with Jeremy Clarkson, where they say, he's difficult, you're going to have trouble, you're not going to get very much time, because then the expectations are lower, and they're happier for you in the moment to improvise, which is what Fred was on that shoot, and we just improvised.
We got lucky with those goats for sure.
Yeah.
I just remembered the other good example of a bad brief was the not brief, but was the Blur one where they wanted to like change the ethnicities.
Yeah,
of
that
each
was
band.
crazy.
It's just mental. I'm so glad that never happened.
That's just another time. I mean, things have changed a lot. You know, one thing I would say is that that one thing I have been consistent. I don't think I've changed that much because So, for instance, I've never done pictures like Fred was decrying this YouTube channel that has like lots of pictures of nude. This guy that photographs all these
like
nude
Terry
women.
Richardson.
Yeah. And I always felt that stuff was just cheesy and okay, I guess sex sells, but I was never interested in those pictures. I don't think they just are kind of shallow. Obviously, we are kind of humans, and we sort of evaluate other human beings, and we think, he or she's got a nice bottom or whatever. We that is part of being human. But when it gets used in a way to sell magazines or to kind of generate interest,
But on
it's
a thumbnail.
It's kind of tacky.
Yeah. In today's day and age, like that's a surefire way to get clicks, isn't it? Like just nudes and things.
Yeah,
like, it's just.
I mean,
too easy.
I remember photographing Gail Porter, who was like sort of one of the Lads Mag's sort of favourites back in the day, and they kept saying to me, "We don't want it to be like FHM, but," which meant they did want it to be like FHM, and I just sort of felt. I don't mind, taking a picture of somebody nude or whatever, if it happens sort of organically, if the person's quite extrovert. But I really liked Gail, and I thought she was quite a vulnerable person back then, So I wasn't playing ball, and I sort of made her look like Doris Day. It just wasn't. I'm not that guy. Like Jerry Seinfeld says in one of his things, I'm not an orgy guy. I'm kind of like, I'd rather make a portrait. And actually, sometimes you can take a portrait of somebody, and they are just very charismatic and sexy. They don't even need to have, be naked or whatever.
Yeah.
But I'm sounding like an actor. I'll do it, but only if it's integral to the plot. if it happens sort of organic, then that's different. But but that was very much in the 90s. There was a lot of that about, and I remember saying when people started calling out Terry Richardson, who was a proponent of this type of thing, and and a lot of bad stuff sort of subsequently emerged about him. I remember saying, I tweeted, and a lot of people direct messaged me, but they didn't want to do it publicly. And I said, is Terry Richardson America's Jimmy Savile? Which is quite a out there thing to say.
Yeah,
I'd rather just say it. I mean, it's irritating as a photographer when, as a result of that being the prevailing aesthetic, you get asked to do like a sexy picture of
you always get asked if you do pornos, don't you?
It's always by certain men of certain ages.
Genuinely, it's
Honestly,
amazing like how many.
I say probably every couple of months, and there'll be a man who's about 40, 45, and he'll just go like, do you do pornos as well then? No.
Oh no! Well, there's a kind of integrity to it. It's okay if you're going to do porn. I
Probably
think
pays well.
there's a kind of honesty to that. I've become more puritanical about the porn industry actually, because I think it's a luxury belief to be I'm okay with it. They're sex workers or whatever, and the same with prostitution. This is totally going off on a tangent, but I do think actually if I don't want my daughter. I don't particularly aspire to her becoming an erotic dancer or a prostitute. Then I don't think I should be saying it's okay for other people who don't have those choices, to do. And actually, it's just basically men buying women's bodies. There's no other way, and porno is a thin end of the wedge, and obviously, it's so ubiquitous. And it sort of had a massive effect on people's lives, in terms of their intimate relationships and everything. I say to my 13-year-old son, I probably tried to say it to Fred as well, that
where's this going?
Just pointing out, that pornography is not an accurate representation. It needs to be said to
That's
young
an important
men.
lesson for a 13-year-old, 100%.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's something I worry about with my son. Like as he gets older, it's like I've got to tell him that's not real. That's like it's acting. It's fake.
How old? Oh,
so he's 5 at the moment.
5, okay.
But it's not, I'm thinking a little bit ahead.
Yeah, you got to have that conversation.
Yeah.
Oh, that took us off on a tangent.
I think it's interesting.
Good, yeah.
It's grist in the mill.
I don't think I'm cutting any of this out, to be honest.
Well, it's telling though that you get asked that, or that you both get asked like that sort of question.
Well, I
It's
used
like
to get
a man with a camera. He must do like lewd
yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
You know, it's just like
It's the way certain people think.
yeah, and like you say, it's a certain age group in a certain industry,
Yeah.
like the businessy type.
Yeah,
So
it's just like men of a certain age.
They don't have it anymore. But when I used to get, like, when I was at, I come back down to Devon and see my old mates and stuff, from Tiverton Comprehensive, and they'd be like, "Oh, you're a photographer, are you?" And they go, "Do you do any page 3?" And funnily enough, I have actually taken the picture that was on page 3 because I photographed Zoe Ball, who is very, is very empowered and very sexy and everything. And I'd done a shoot with her for like teen magazines. And then my agent suggested we do a shoot with like a kind of adult, sexy sort of series of pictures, and it kind of felt appropriate with her because she is very sexy. And I did these pictures. I shot this picture of her in the bath wearing this dress that went see through and everything. And they to get publicity, because it was published in Esquire magazine. Esquire gave it to all the press and everything, and it was used on page 3 of the Sun. And it said Zoe's alive and dripping because it was alive and kicking.
oh my god!
So I have got a tear sheet of that. That's another one for the video. Maybe Fred will veto that.
We can't put that one on there.
That's Patreon. One for the Patreon.
yeah, maybe,
Patreon.
maybe.
Yeah.
If they're lucky.
Do you ever find that you're like starstruck by anyone, apart from Larry the cat?
Well, actually, speaking of Larry's, I would probably be starstruck. I met Adam Buxton. I was telling you about the podcast, the Ramble Chat podcast, and I'm a huge fan of his oeuvre. So I was a bit starstruck with him. It's only people that are really personal to me. So although he's been kind of slightly cancelled, I was a massive Smiths fan, and I photographed Johnny Marr and Mike Joyce and Andy Rourke. I would still like to photograph Morrissey. I would still like to meet him because he played a big part in my life when I was younger. And speaking of Larry's, I'm a huge fan of Curb Your Enthusiasm, so I would be starstruck with him. But most of the time, it doesn't work if you're starstruck. It really doesn't. You kind of you're stymied, and so even if I got to photograph Larry David, I would probably keep my cards close to my chest, because otherwise it changes the whole dynamic of that relationship that you're recording if you sort of tell them. So it's better to kind of like, you obviously, like I remember photographing Steve Coogan, and I like Steve Coogan. I like what he does, and he's really brilliant. But he doesn't want to be friends with me, even though we're the same age. And so that's fine. So I just keep it to, like, I knew a lot of what he'd done, more so than most people. So Saxondale, which was a program, if you saw it, but it's very good about this roadie guy. And and so it's helpful having an intimate knowledge of their body of work, but it's always a bad mistake to be too sycophantic.
Yeah, I do think like the phrase like "never meet your heroes" is quite true. Like, and your Jeremy Clarkson video, like, I've always thought he would probably be a bit of a knob in person, but like that definitely like solidified it. Like, I never want to meet Jeremy Clarkson, but I think he's like amazing and everything he's done.
Do you know, he wasn't I didn't mind him because he didn't misrepresent himself. He didn't know he was being a knob as well, probably because like everyone, he lives in a world.
But I think that's just who he is, isn't it?
Also, he lives in a world where everyone's frightened of him. And what was most irksome about that was we were kept waiting for 8 hours or something ridiculous. And so, but I don't think he was probably even aware. I think people were not telling him we were waiting, and people weren't saying it's not right leaving those people out there or whatever. And so, and then when he was just Jeremy Clarkson, wasn't he?
He was exactly what you see on TV.
Yeah, that's exactly.
And also, it's like, I'm not going to be intimidated by him, so I'm not intimidated by people.
I think you're annoying him a little bit as well. He's complaining about a bad back and. Does like, no, just move here. Or, like,
I'm like a basic like.
At one point he was like, you were like, you can sit down if you want, and he's like standing on a patch of like mud, basically, so he's not going to sit down on this mud. Like.
I'm like a sort of, if people like that, fuck them. They're doing Amazon prime. You know, he's a multi-millionaire.
Yeah.
And it's like, you know, you're contractually obliged to do this.
And I mean, this is for your show. Like, you're doing this for
this is
him.
promoting your show.
Yeah.
And so, also, I'm a better photographer than he is a presenter, and he's a good presenter. But I'm you know, that's the way to think of it. I do think that, and I think
because
that,
you can photograph anyone, but he can probably only do presenting on cars and now farms. So
I'm like a
think
little
about it.
Jack Russell. I'm just like, you know, I'll just keep pushing it until they tell me to f off. And basically, what happens is the weird thing about memory. It's not a hard drive that you access. So if I photograph him again, he won't go back to. He might see the YouTube video, but unlikely. He won't go back to the hard drive in his memory and then basically think he was an arsehole. But basically, he'll just remember the pictures. Oh, the goats look great. You know, he was really enthusiastic about the goats before he was worried about being headbutted in the balls, wasn't he? But basically, that's what happens is you meet these people again and you think they're going to remember you being a bit of a pain in the arse, and they just remember the pictures and then they have a good memory of it and they think you're a really good photographer. So they
is that why you go
more
in
time
with like prints or whatever to show them that, so that then their first memory is the photos?
Yeah, I mean, in that case, it was so long ago. There's no way he would remember.
But it's a nice
the
quote,
first
another one of your
must have
quotes.
been 20s or something.
Yeah, I mean, he spent a lifetime sort of drinking wine. His brain is probably like completely addled. I mean, I basically, you know, for me, I have quite a good memory, so I can remember going to that place in. Although, having said that, I did think it was in Fitzrovia, but when I sort of checked my diary, it was in Bayswater. But basically, I can remember going and being around him and stuff like that. Is actually quite helpful to the channel, is that I do have this good memory.
Yeah,
And you
definitely.
Who doesn't want to see a picture of themselves 20 years ago?
Yeah. I don't do that every time, but
Okay.
I mean, I should do, and I will do if I remember to do it.
Yeah, I think that's clever, because if they don't remember the shoot, they'll probably remember the photos, and if you've got them there, then they'll instantly just think, oh, great. I mean, good hands.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Have you had anyone who's watched your YouTube videos yet when you show up?
Well, it was so strange last night. I don't know. I mean, when we were at this book launch, you know, did we talk about it before?
We talked about it before filming, so I
Yeah.
want to get it in.
So this was like something out of a dream that I'd scripted myself, and then you normally
It couldn't
think,
have been better.
I mean, the editor of the Fred and Harry kind of life series on Netflix would say, no, that's not plausible. That would be ridiculous. I mean, basically, I'm in the middle of talking to Colin and, you know, congratulating him on his book, and then Fred sort of overstepping a little by sort of saying, perhaps you could go on our YouTube channel. And at that moment, his childhood friend sort of comes into view, and then basically said, before he's really even had a good conversation with Colin, recognises me from the YouTube channel and says, and then says really nice things about the YouTube channel, and
That's
says,
cool.
and you must be Fred, which is bizarre. But no, I mean, I don't think so. I mean, quite often in the preamble before I do my shoots,
You tell them.
I will. Previously, I have sort of sent people a link to my website because people can see who you're dealing with, and quite often, I mean, I used to sort of have my portfolio on my mobile phone and I'd show them, and before that I'd have a physical thing, because it just puts some distance between you and the multitude of other photographers that they've dealt with and who've been a pain in the arse and stuff. And invariably, it's all about kind of getting them to buy into it and actually commit and realise that it's a worthwhile endeavour, and that they're going to get some good pictures that are going to be out there as a result of it. And they should be lucky to come into my world. I mean, a really good example is, like, I remember photographing this guy in the city who was a big player called Edson Mitchell. He died in his private jet, I think. But basically, I turned up and I was wearing shorts and I didn't have an assistant or anything. And I saw the assistant went across the trading floor to him. He had his own glass office. He was like one of the big guys in the city. And I saw him just sort of look across at me with utter derision. You know, I was unshaven and everything. And then he basically just was shaking his head. And then I was for Fortune magazine, which is a big magazine at the time. This is like 20 years ago. And the assistant came back and he said, he doesn't want to be photographed by you. And so I said, well, just show him this, you know. And I had this little portfolio with Demi Moore, Martin Scorsese, you know, all these really famous people. And then the next thing, he's bounding out, you know. And we do the shoot, and then after that, he worked at Deutsche Bank. I was going into Deutsche Bank and shooting all the traders all the time. I was getting all this regular work, really well paid, and it shows that, you know. I mean, but the point I made to him is that I don't work in the city. I'm not a trader. Yeah. You come into my world. You know, I'm a photographer. I'm not going to put on a suit. I'm not going to be comfortable wearing a suit. I'll wear what I want to wear. You know, you're lucky. You're going to be part of my photographic body of work. You know, you should be so lucky. You know, I'm not some jobbing guy that's come in. And he should have made that assumption, the fact that I was shooting him for Fortune magazine. Yeah. But, you know, and it sounds egotistical, but it's more about working in a way that will enable me to feel comfortable and relaxed. And I'm not going to be relaxed wearing a tie if I'm not used to wearing a tie. Yeah.
Like, I shot your sister's wedding at the end of August, and people asked me, like, oh, are you going to wear a suit? And I'm like, no, it's going to be 35 degrees, and I'm not going to be in any of the photos. Do you know what I mean? I'm
no
like,
one remember what you were wearing.
I'm like, why would I wear a suit? You know what I mean?
All they remember is that the photos were really good.
My job is to not be in any of the photos. I'm taking them. So it's like, I'm just going to be as comfortable as I can. Exactly. Like, I've always found that weird how wedding photographers like suit up. That's weird.
We found a similar thing about when we've been like we were in Birmingham the other night, and it was like 11 o'clock at night, and it's sort of quite a scary area, and then someone just comes up and asks what you're doing. We show them our YouTube channel, and she's like, oh yeah, I'll subscribe. She's subscribed to the YouTube channel. Yeah, so that's quite a nice way.
Yeah, we get a lot of interactions like that, don't we? Actually, like, I mean, people just see you with cameras and they're like, oh, what are you up to? Like, it is weird to some other people, like that. You would just go out in a town and just randomly take photos. So you get a lot of people ask, like, what the hell are you doing?
I think I'm a big advocate of YouTube. I mean, I think for your generation and people, you know, Fred, this is TV basically. And I don't think the penny has dropped for a lot of people of my generation. You know, they still kind of tuning in for EastEnders or whatever. No, absolutely.
Stop paying for it. Yeah.
I'm wary of the time as well, but I want to talk about your books.
Oh yeah, how are we doing for time? We're doing okay.
Yeah,
I think we're
nearly 2 o'clock. But
so I think probably, I mean, basically the books came around that sort of time where you get to when you haven't reached yet, when you're middle-aged, and I sort of felt that I had a certain degree of competence and skill that I'd acquired through being a photographer, and I was still getting commissions, but I was aware that the sort of photographic landscape was changing. Like I said, the expression I used, Fred mocked me for saying, you know, it's an industry in terminal decline, printed media, because it's being hollowed out by Google and Facebook and so on. But it was more about kind of, you know, I'd sort of made relatively good choices, you know, when I was sort of earning a bit of money, and I'd kind of, instead of developing a coke habit and joining the Groucho Club, I kind of, you know, me and Fred's mum, you know, we would just be buying our clothes from charity shops still and car boot sales and, you know, living modestly. And so I just thought I wanted to kind of live a life where I did things for the intrinsic pleasure of doing them. And there's a book by Oliver James, I think it's called Affluenza, and he talks about selfish capitalism. And it basically, the whole premise of the book is that capitalism wants everybody to be competing against each other, and that's why social media works. You want to sort of self-promote, self-market it, and it's not good for your mental health. And so in light of reading this book, I just decided I was going to do personal projects. But they would be things that I felt I had skin in the game, that I was invested in. And so the first one was about, we talked about my dad before, you know, it was probably an attempt to get his approval, which was never going to work. But my dad was Jewish. His parents came to America from Russia and Romania for a better life. And, you know, he was the only son of these immigrants. But he was an atheist, you know, he didn't really know anything or wasn't interested in his Jewishness, and I wasn't Jewish because it's a matrilineal religion, so your mother has to be Jewish. And I grew up in Devon, you know, from the age of 8, so I never met any Jewish people. So it was kind of part exploration of my identity alongside a no-brainer. In fact, I was just answering a question, one of our Patreons was asking about getting funding and everything, and I said a big a big important point when getting funding is choosing the right subject. So that was a very good subject to choose, because we'd got to a point where
it's like now or never.
Yeah, there won't be many people with first-hand experience.
Yeah.
And also, it was quite prescient because of the current situation of the rise of the strongman and sort of totalitarianism and people undermining democracy. And, you know, it's a good example of people talking about what happens when democracies fail and people start believing dictatorship is a sort of viable alternative. And so, it kind of did that book over the course of a few years. And I'd say a big turning point was also the need to collaborate, you know, like you guys. I mean, basically, I'd got used to doing everything by myself. And after 2 trips, I did a load of people in North London, and then I did a load of people in Australia, because Fred's mum was Australian, so we'd go back to Australia. So I took an internal flight down to Melbourne, which is the biggest population of Jewish people outside of Europe. And I basically then got an email, because I'd gone on to the Australian Jewish News in order to promote the project and find participants. I got this email basically from someone called Miriam Heckman, who's like an amazing person, granddaughter of survivors. And she asked if she could be involved in some way. And there's a part of you that thinks, well, I've worked really hard on this. It's mine. But basically, I sort of involved her, and we went, and she just got married to an Israeli. And so we met up never met her before. We met in Jerusalem, and we travelled all around Israel and photographed survivors there. And then we finished off in New York, and upstate New York in America. And so it was a really comprehensive body of work. And then it was published as a book in 2017 by Hachette. So it was a big big print run, you know, not a niche photographic book like my second book, which was Hoxton Mini Press, Single Dad.
That's the one I've got. We love Hoxton Mini Press.
It's a great outfit.
Books, and they're all good price as well. They're not like
they
really
are good
expensive.
value. Yeah, I think so.
But they're nice quality as well. Like they could easily be 50 quid.
I mean, I put a lot. That was during lockdown, and I thought, you know, you have more time on your hands, and I thought, well, I need to get this project out there and finished, and draw a line underneath it. And the turning point for that project, interestingly, was again collaboration. So I'd photographed all these portraits of these single dads, and even if I do say so myself, I think I'd done an okay job. But they were just sort of portraits. And Russ O'Connell, who's the picture editor at the Sunday Times magazine, he had an interview with Rio Ferdinand, and he'd seen the pictures because they'd won a prize in the Association of Photographers. They were exhibited, and he asked if he could run them. And so I sold him a license to run them alongside this piece by Rio Ferdinand talking about being a single parent dad. And he asked me about caption information, and I suddenly realised that I needed to involve the dads in making this book. So
that definitely makes it. I'm not really much of a reader. Like I don't read books, and if I buy a photo book, I don't always read like any of the text. But this one, like, you just makes you really want to read the story because it's interesting.
Well, what happened was I asked the dads how they became a single parent dad and what they love about fatherhood. And the first email that came back, I suddenly realised, Jesus, the words alongside again, it was also something that with my book on the Survivor book, I got a friend who's a writer to help me write the foreword. With the Single Dad book, I wrote the foreword, and my confidence was starting to grow, and I actually transcribed the interviews that I got from the emails from the single dads into the first person, and gave them a uniformity of prose. And I think, you know, it was another thing that gave me a lot more confidence about writing and communicating. And so I'm really proud of that book. I mean, it is a quixotic project because people aren't really that into men and fatherhood that much, you know, in spite of the fact that it's really important. And those guys are the main carer of their children, you know, they're not kind of doing 50-50 or anything like
it's very like hard hitting. Like the first story is a mum gets hit by a car and they both at the side of the road and they both see it, and it's like wow, like that's the first one, and that's not the first thing you think about like when you think of single dad, you don't really, obviously that happens, but that's not the first thing you think, a tragic accident, and it really makes you want to read more stories.
It's a tough read. I mean, I do think, it should be pointed out, we talk about funding or whatever, I had to sort of kick in some money towards getting it out there, but I just wanted to get it out there. And, if it does really well over time, maybe I'll get some money back on the publishing. But it's a good example, actually, because it led on to my third book, because Alan de Botton at the School of Life, who have, huge social media heft.
Massive YouTube channel.
Yeah, I mean, he basically saw my single dad book and really liked it. He likes the Hoxton Mini Press books.
Yeah.
And he actually sort of asked me to do a book on divorce.
Okay.
And so that's my third book on divorce, which we did, which came out at the end of last year.
Mark's got a funny story about the divorce book.
Oh yeah, so it was on my table last night, and I come in, and my wife walks in. She goes, "Why have you got a book on divorce?" That was it. Yeah, I was like, "Oh no, I'm interviewing the guy tomorrow."
Oh dear!
So relieved.
I've got something to tell you. No, I mean that was that's very personal. In a way, it's kind of more personal because I had to find a lot of the people in it are friends, and it's quite difficult. It's one thing, if you're a dad and you're kind of heroic, really, in a quiet way, because you're sort of quietly getting on with being the main carer and everything. But if there's so much stigma attached to being divorced, I mean, I felt it. I felt like up until that point, everything in my life had gone perfectly, and I enjoyed doing what I did. I had material success. I had status. And then suddenly, it's like an absolute bomb going off in your life. But I chose to sort of be conciliatory in the approach that I took, and I think it's actually probably given my children, including Fred, a sort of blueprint of how relationships work, which is realistic. So, maybe
they don't last forever,
or they evolve into something else. Because I mean, I still love Fred's mum, and
I think that's unusual. Well, from my friends growing up, like my dad and my mum not being together, but my dad coming round to just have a tea with my mum.
Yeah.
After being divorced.
Yeah, I think
and that's the case for all of your exes, really.
Yeah, I think it's a bit
my
of a
harem of women.
It's a bit of a misconception that like people that have split up are like
hate each
arch
other.
nemesis.
Yeah.
Like, do you know what I mean? Like, it's just not realistic.
But I think
you
it's
still
a good
have a
influence to
good
have
relationship.
On us for sure.
Yeah,
It's short-sighted, really. I mean, when I did sort of couples counselling with my youngest's mum, we ended up splitting up sadly because I kind of probably rebounded into that relationship a bit too quickly, as you tend to do because you're lonely and you want to fix it as quickly as possible. But we were together for 10 years, and I learnt about this thing called transactional analysis. And within us, in the way do you know about it? When you communicate, you're either in parent or child mode, and you need to avoid you need to be in adult mode. You need to communicate really, really well. And I definitely think, that's how you learn, by making mistakes, And I didn't have a good model with my own parents, so I do cut myself some slack. But also I realised that, these wonderful, amazing people that I've had the relationship with, that they've given me the fortunate gift of being a dad, why would I want... I still love them all, because basically I wouldn't have Fred without without Jane, and this morning I went to get coffee for Fred, and then I just instinctively always phone her all the time, and it's interesting as well that's really the crowning achievement in my life, is the fact that I've got children and they still like me. I mean, that's actually... When push comes to shove, nothing else really matters. There's no point in being really successful or being a good photographer or a good filmmaker if your children think you're an arsehole.
Yeah. And I think getting hung up on that side of life can make your kids think you're an arsehole, I
think you've grown a lot since divorce.
Yeah, absolutely. And the book is, I think, having had that experience gave me the authority to be able to ask people, quite invasive questions, because I've walked in their shoes, and I just try and I do think the book is much more upbeat. I don't know if you found that than the Single Dad book, because it's more, I'd say maybe 1%, two out of 50 people, which is actually 4%, but very few people. There's 2 people that were quite religious and they hadn't really got over it and they were still kind of hurting. But for most people, it was an opportunity to recalibrate their lives and actually sort of think about what life is really about, and get a sort of more informed perspective and make changes.
Looking back at all your career, is there any photos that stand out?
It's so nice doing this with Fred, because basically it's a constant process of discovering these little gems. But I do take pictures all the time. So
yeah, I was going to say, are there non paid photos that are actually stand out more?
Well, the 2 recent ones were, we were in Spain in fact I went on holiday with Jane and her current partner, didn't we? Went to Spain, and I took this picture of Gordon, her partner, in the swimming pool. I really liked that picture. It got into an exhibition.
Nice. That's
recently.
really cool that a personal photo can still end up in
absolutely.
exhibitions. Really
and
cool.
then I was in
You got quite a few of me when I was a kid.
There's one of you, that was in the
the
house
garage.
one.
Yeah,
the
yeah.
garage. I love that one.
There's also
Right,
we were talking to somebody else about the Taylor Wessing, and it was only when I scanned all my, because I've been in the Taylor Wessing more than any other photographer. About 14 times I've got pictures in this portrait competition, and I forgot to mention, because Fred was there, that there's a picture of Fred in the Taylor Wessing.
Which one?
Of when we were in France, where they were all listening to the. It looks really dated now, because they're listening to an iPad and they've got all these cables.
There's an iPod, and we're all listening to this one iPod. There's about 5-6 kids.
All these
with a
cables are
splitter
going
in
into
the cable.
Right,
splitters and things. But basically, I love it when a picture that is not of a celebrity, because it's confirmation of my eye rather than because celebrity is very seductive. It does sort of draw people in. It makes people think that something is more interesting than maybe it is.
Yeah.
Nice. And there's the video with that woman that I photographed in Pret a Manger. Have you seen that one?
Oh yeah. I remember you saying that was one that you always loved.
But I was in France earlier this year. We were on holiday and just parked the car, and then I'll send you this picture because no one's seen it anywhere. But my partner, she wanted a copy for her kitchen, and it's just such a bizarre photograph. I don't know if you've seen it. I'll do you a print. I mean, it's basically, we parked this car, and it's in a medieval town where my cousin lives. We were staying with my cousin, and there's this poodle, and it's just standing up, looking out of this car like this, and it looks like a sort of small child wearing a poodle suit or something, and it's got black eyes, and it's just staring like that. And there's a guy sitting in the passenger seat, and I had the Fuji with me. I just took 1 or 2 frames, and it's just a really strange picture, but it's quite funny. But my partner really likes it, but her kids they think my work's a bit sinister. But it's true, I like the sinister. I do like having subtext or some kind of dark undercurrent.
I do kind of like photos that non-photographers just don't understand why you've taken it.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? As any photographer would look at it and go, "Oh, that's really cool," but any non-photographer would be like, "Why did you take this picture of that?" I kind of love that.
You talk about the one where you took there's a cup in a puddle.
And you love it.
I was like, "Oh my god, that's incredible!"
Somehow I made a cup in a puddle look really.
Like, how do you make
really
that look good?
Yeah,
cool.
Oh, I did want to ask one more question about books. Actually, did you ever think about doing a book when you were younger, like on portraits or celebrities or
Yeah, I mean, it did seem when I was a little bit younger. Not I never thought about making books or anything when I started.
Yeah.
And at some point, there's that Star White book that I gave you.
Yeah.
That was a paper company wanted to showcase their papers, and they it was back in the day. I mean, it was ridiculous. It was an American company. They don't exist anymore, and they gave me loads of copies, and I think they paid about $120,000 to use my imagery.
Right.
We had to get Minnie Driver and Martin Scorsese, all these people to agree to it. But the $120,000, 50% got taken by my agent in America, and then another 50% got taken by my agent in the UK. But I still got a chunk of change for something that, you know, it was a nice object which was being skipped when the agency folded, and I sort of loaded up my car with these boxes, so I sell them on the website. But it's
was that before the Deloitte one? There's another one.
Yeah, no, there was a Deloitte as well.
The business one?
Heads of business. So that was an exhibition I had at the National Portrait Gallery around 2005.
Was that before Starlight was 2000?
Yeah, it was 2000 as Starlight. Yeah, the Heads of Business was a kind of very ostentatious looking, in its sort of velvet kind of case and so on, and made by this company called the English Group in Bath. I don't know if you've come across them, but they're just sort of designers, Mark Carter, and they did a really nice job and produced this beautiful thing. But I think it was sponsored by Deloitte. It was at the National Portrait Gallery, and I think Deloitte realised this was a good opportunity to get access to all these heads of business, because it was the head of BP, the head of Tesco's, and so on and so forth. Alan Sugar, yeah, exactly. And after the exhibition happened, I got an email from Alan Sugar. I think we talked about that, didn't we?
Yeah.
With him saying, "Tut. They said congratulations on your exhibition at the National Portrait Gallery. Tut." In quotation marks. Tie wasn't straight, it was nonsense. He was just having fun with me. But,
one of the things you brought up before in the Kylie video first, and it's come up a few times, was where they tried to get the copyright, and they said they were going to pay you £1, but they never did. So you were like, I loved it when you were like, well, I'm taking it, I'm taking it back.
I do love that you stand your ground on that.
I don't think really any of these contracts are worth anything anyway, because you're being asked to sign a contract under duress, and I think you could easily make that case. Right, yeah. And also, you know, Kylie's left that management, so they obviously fell out, and they're no longer working together.
So how long do they really have that contract?
So are the management going to enforce a contract? I mean, is Kylie going to go back to the management in order to enforce the contract? I think they're just kind of... It's really irritating. I mean, we did a shoot just the other day, didn't we?
Which one?
The shoot. It was
for new Amazon show.
Yeah, for the not Amazon. I think it's Disney
Amazon.
Plus.
Oh, was it Disney?
It's the Jilly Cooper thing. I photographed Jilly a couple of times, but basically it's this sexy bonkbuster type of. That's what her books used to be called. They were all about. It's called Riders. It was all about kind of show jumping. And we were photographing the lead actor, this sexy guy and everything. And, the publicist basically said to us, just on the day before or the days before, we want you to sign this. And it wasn't copyright, it was just giving them approval. And I sort of said to them, look, I'm looking 20 years from now when I have a retrospective of my work. Yeah. And I don't want to be mired with burdened with these kind of decisions as to which pictures I include because of stupid contracts that we... Yeah. And there's a picture also that they didn't like where he's sort of got his top off and he's got the most incredible body. And it's like, they might not want it being published now, and that's between them and the magazine. I've left it up to the magazine whether they want to publish it. But in 20 years' time, he's going to love that picture. Yeah. We love pictures of ourselves.
It's so funny, though. Yeah. While you're taking that, his assistant or his PR was just like freaking out, like, please stop, please stop. And I was like, no worries. Yeah.
I think it's really good that you talk about that in the videos, because I feel like photographers don't really... Well, I think just talking about money and stuff like that in general is...
Again,
people just don't like doing it.
Well, that's another American thing.
Yeah.
British,
And also, I do... I mean,
And I
think about myself and what I would like to know. And I do talk about money intentionally because... I did to one of our patrons, didn't I? I was telling him, about the funding for the Survivor books. I got like £10,000 advance for that. And then, for a project that I'd funded myself. And then after that... The Australian War Memorial in Canberra had an exhibition about the aftermath of conflict, and they acquired 3 prints from the Australian survivors, and 4 prints actually, and they paid about £4,000. So I think it's really important. I think what happens is, tyranny kind of works when there isn't transparency because they can divide and conquer. So if they can quote me and say, because I had it quoted to me when I worked for Condé Nast, when I worked for Vogue, and one of our videos is going to talk about this, I had it told to me, why aren't you signing away your copyright to Condé Nast? David Bailey has, and the implication is, well, he's better than you, and he's signed it. And it's like, well, that's why it's good if people can say, well, Harry Borden didn't sign it, and I just think it's really incumbent upon you as maybe a senior member of the photography world to kind of fight these. Because if I sign it, then they're going to be shoehorned into signing it. And the default exists because that's right and proper and just. And in 1988, the Design and Copyright Patent Act, it resides with the creator, and that's how it should be. So, I don't have any qualms about maybe I'll regret it being so kind of candid, but I just think the truth is divine. I'll just try and be honest.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, thank you for coming on. And thank you for inviting us to your place.
Yeah, thanks for coming all this way. Appreciate it.
It's good. Thank you.
It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah,
really nice.
Excellent. And thank you for watching.
Yeah.
We'll see you next time. Don't forget to like, comment, like and subscribe and comment if you're able. And we'll see you next time for more exciting and sexy adventures on film. Cheers.
Nice.